Welcome to Around the Fence Post, where grit meets growth, stories spark change, and real conversations build stronger farms and futures.
Exactly what we have here is our Mennonite community close by. They've got more technology than we do.
Yeah, same here.
We're out here with our old equipment. We've still got the 4020. My brother's grinding feed right now.
Yeah.
Still got the 40 series, the old boxcar Magnum. And you've got the Mennonites that don't own a tractor unless they had a particular affinity for something really old that Dad used to have.
Right.
They have plastic tractors that are polished up, and it's kind of fun.
That's awesome.
But these folks, and this last fall, I had started dealing with them and did some direct shipping, and then I had an order with them this spring, and I went with a guy. We had a few runs to make, so I've got a couple guys that'll make deliveries, and I tagged along, and we went down and yeah, we're like going into this place, and we're like kind of looking, and there's the horse and the buggy backed into the shed, and where's so and so, and they've got drivers that they're still getting around with, but they're Mennonite. They were sure to tell me that they're Mennonite, and they have electricity in the house, and they have a telephone, but they don't have computers, emails, things like that. So I don't know where that line gets drawn.
I don't know either. Every Mennonite community out here is very different. One's pretty conservative and is going to use older equipment, and the next one down the road, everything's no less than 5 years old. You just depends on what Mennonite church you go to.
Yeah. There's actually two of them right here with us, and it's kind of funny on the side of we had when we first moved here. Now they're both color car. But when we first moved here, I'm not even kidding. When there was the black car church and the you could drive, the beige or the green.
Whatever you want. Yeah. That's funny. I've never thought about it that way. It's the same way.
It really is. It really is funny, but it's also and they're really they're good neighbors. They really are. Mostly my idea of a good neighbor is that old saying, horse keep your fences horse high, was it bull strong and pig tight. So
yeah.
that's pretty much it. I be there if I need you, but other than that, you can wave on the way through. I'm good.
right, for sure.
So that's it's been a good group, and they've parted them up again, multiple times because of the way that community has grown. So, awesome. Boy, we started early with the rabbit holes.
Yeah,
Chris.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to go down them, man. It's easy to go down them, and I don't mind doing that one bit.
That's fair enough. I've been really excited when you agreed to come on. You're somebody that I've kind of followed your social media side at least a little bit over the last 10 years or so, since I got into being a dealer myself with Josh first and then Byron Seeds. So,
sure.
If you don't mind giving me some of your backstory and kind of how you got to where you are. Obviously your bride is a big part of what you do, and now your daughter as well, which is such a big thing for really anybody I like talking to or working with, because it's such a big part of my background and my story as well.
Sure. We even got her a little electric forklift the other day and made her little seed bags with little pallets and stuff. So when we're unloading and moving between trucks, she can have her own little spot with her own forklift. And she wanted to drive the large forklifts all the time, and that just was kind of a train wreck. So might as well get her a little electric one and some stuff she can't mess up, and just fence her off in her own little corner. And it's we had kids late in life, and I didn't know what that was going to be like, and it's been so much better than I can even imagine, to just think that your kids can grow up working with you. And that's just been so cool to me. Figuring it out in your late 30s, early 40s has been a lot of fun with her. We only have one kid, but she's very much a part of the whole operation and loves to be outside with us the whole time. But long story short, I'm living in my hometown. Never thought that would happen. Graduated high school, thought, well, I'm going to get out of here. I live in the Texas Panhandle. It's close to nobody, nowhere, and no big towns for the most part. And moved all over the Midwest after school and worked in animal nutrition and feed manufacturing. And then thought, you know, it's really hard to move up in that industry unless you move a lot. And so I was talking to my boss, and he goes, "Well, your next move's going to be to South Phoenix, Casa Grande area. Just go look at it." And man, that is some hot. I thought where I live was hot. That's like the devil's doorstep out there. And the cow, you work cattle at night, they're under shade all the time. And I just told my boss I was done. So anyhow, ended up back at home, and it's been a good ride ever since then. Wasn't sure what I was going to do when I got home. So I wasn't married at the time, was on a dairy for a little while. Long story short, worked out of feed yards in college, animal nutrition after college, dairies right when I moved back home, and then it's kind of what got me back into seed. So currently I'm at coffee forage seed, have been for quite some time, and it's just a really good mix of having that background, right? So you can walk on the farm and look at silage piles, or you can talk to guys about actually, using products, and we're breeding at Coffee Seed. We're breeding towards, what the nutritionists want, not just kind of what comes out of the program. And so I think that's been the fun part, is we're connecting all these missing links over all these years that people have not been connecting. And as it gets drier out where we're at, as we run out of irrigation water, that's just becoming so much more important. And my wife quit teaching 6, 7 years ago now. Well, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know. And is full time in the seed business as well. She's retail. We kind of cover Western Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, Eastern New Mexico, and she's having a lot of fun with it. It's been a big learning curve, but she grew up on a ranch north of me, about 30 minutes. In the first few years we were married, I would make her sit through cotton harvest and help me, and she was like, we've got to get out of the cotton business. This is terrible. It's slow, it's miserable, it's incredibly expensive. Had some great yields and some good times, but for the most part, our personal farm is switching more to protein production. We're headed back to where Mother Nature intended our area to be, which was cattle and feeding cattle, and just trying to get back to where I guess my great 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 grandparents had it, right, before we broke it out. So been interesting. A lot of changes happening locally in agriculture to our geography. A lot of changes in a hurry.
I hope that's mostly good changes. I think there is a lot of that mindset where we're now realizing the mistakes that were made at such a grand scale in the late 1800s and early,
Yeah.
and and now people are going, we've got to, and we've already seen cover crops, of course, really picked up in the last 30 years. Really, I would say even more a shorter time frame than that. But I remember being a boy, and I'm probably close to your age. I'm mid 30s, but I remember as a boy the different programs and stuff that farmers would sign up for, and they're a good start. But if people don't use them as part of a system, it doesn't do anything.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and that was one where I strongly encourage grazing it, even if you do only plant it at the 60 pounds that they'll pay you for. Hey, great, go put your cows out there and flash them across this field and get some value, and not only that, let your cows add value back. So I don't know, hopefully Texas has got more sunshine as far as the future of cattle coming back than Tennessee does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in our part of the world, you get south of Lubbock, it's pretty cotton centric still, pretty sandy. Where we're at, from us north, I take my father in law, for instance, he quit irrigating in the 1980s. And he said it was the best move he's ever done. He said he all of a sudden, he could start making money, he wasn't borrowing as much money. He has a lot of free time on his hands when he quit irrigating. So I can't wait for that day. But when it comes to like family being landlords and keeping grandma a check and keeping dad a check and aunts and whatnot, we're still watering because the infrastructure is paid for and it's there, but we're incredibly close to being done with watering a large portion of the acreage. And bought a chopper a couple weeks ago. I told my wife, I was like, I'm just gonna have to do something to like make myself stick to this animal thing, so let's invest some money in and throw some money at it. That way we're forced to do what I keep saying, and she's excited. I mean, her whole life was livestock growing up as a kid, and wants to see our daughter back around that. I hope our daughter doesn't turn into the like needs an F-450, $120,000 bloomer, slant horse trailer, a rodeo arena. I mean, if she does, that's great. But so far, she's pretty happy just checking cows. But yeah, lots of changes coming, and it is really exciting. And 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, give me 10 years to change. And I think the way row crop economics look today, it's change now or never, or quit, or do it may turn around shortly. You never know. Just too much uncertainty in an area where you may, in 2011, I had 2 inches of rain. And then last year I had 20 some odd to nearly 30 inches in spots. And so we're always 2 weeks away from a drought out here, and or closer. And really hard to grow great row crops that way.
Yeah, I can. That makes it a lot harder. I know last year dad likes pushing the envelope quite a bit, and regardless of what his seed salesman / son says,
Yeah,
he does what dad thinks. Hey, I can make this work, and this is going to be my best bang for my buck.
yeah.
And planted oats in March for a spring cutting. Made beautiful stuff. I mean, beautiful. You would have thought it was orchard grass. I could send you a picture, man. I could send you a picture.
That's awesome.
And it is beautiful. But then it was raining when it came off. We were able to get it all wet wrapped, but then we weren't able to get back to the field and get that corn in the ground for another month. And our corn crop got 7/10 of an inch of water the entire time it was growing.
Oh my gosh.
So you'll get a kick out of this, because I don't think he even knew I was talking to you today. I probably told him last week, but we didn't mention it this morning when I saw him. And that's what he came to me about was, hey, I'm thinking that I want to do a short day corn, and then follow it up with and what he was asking about, and it's one of y'all's products, I believe, because it's very much similar to the one that you had commented on that Jeff Jackson had done a video on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a male sterile, aphid tolerant, dwarf, photoperiod sensitive, the whole, and I can't think of the number, but it's a sorghum sudan, but it also has the concept treated. So one that we're very excited about on the sales side.
Sure.
And I know you guys have got to be.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I had Craig Corin on a month or so ago, and he was talking about it, and he goes, "Are you making notes?" I said, "Yeah, I'm excited about this."
Craig's one of my favorite people to chat with, because he does so much just on farm realistic trials. We'll chat about things. He's like, well, I tried it this way and this row spacing, and comes down to some really good data off of that. Craig's just such a great guy to chat with in general.
He's tried it or talked to somebody that has. I agree with that. He's a card, and the stuff he's given me so many tidbits that I'm able to share with customers on, hey, try this spray, or hey, try to fertilize it this way, or try it in this, really has been a positive on, especially the annual side. And I've gotten a lot from him over the years. And Byron's does a good job of working on educating their people. They really do.
I would agree. Of all the places around the world we deal with, Byron's has such a great, and Southeast Agra and Kings, right? That whole group probably does one of the better jobs of educating their dealers. I get a lot of phone calls from other places where customers somehow get our number. We're not online. We don't have a social media presence, really. We try not to be found. We just want to be good genetic providers who provide a really high quality bagged product, and then just leave us to our tinkering in the nursery. And sometimes someone will find our nursery phone number and call and be like, hey, we did this. And I'm like, oh, that was not the best idea. And they're like, well, our dealer didn't know anything about it. So I think I think Byron's does a phenomenal job. Jeff Jackson does a phenomenal job with crop plan. Of course, I kind of forgot. I just threw on a T-shirt today. I'm not repping, but I guess I am. So I
That's all right. I need to have a conversation with him and engage his interest. This is, I mean, around the fence post. I'm not trying to be even, Josh and Craig, of course, have been on, and others have committed, and I fully want to support independent dealers like myself. I mean, I work on the bags of seed sold at Wet Meadows. You
yeah.
know, today's actually the first day I've worn a logoed shirt on here. But yeah, I want the idea of around the fence post is we're sharing ideas, we're sharing, you know, positive things that are happening. We can talk about negative things that are happening in the industry and things to watch
Right.
out for. All those pieces doesn't have anything to do with, and that's why the name's not associated. Otherwise, I'd just be over here having my own little podcast and talking to my own customers. I won't and haven't done some of that, but I also want to make sure that I'm bringing value to anybody listening, whether they live in Plainview, Texas, or if
Right.
it's somebody that lives in, you know, Tennessee or Georgia or Kentucky or wherever Craig lives up there somewhere,
Yeah. Up in the boondocks. Yeah. Yeah.
up in the hill country.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I don't know if you have connected with Corey Sieber yet out at or Casey. I'm sorry, I said Corey. Casey Sieber out at Mountain Meadow Ag does a lot in the drone space, and
Really.
he was 2 episodes for me actually because he had so much technical stuff with the drones. It was really fascinating. So I was like, hey, keep talking.
Right. Right.
Anyway, I just don't want to be what I'm that whole thing just to say that I'm not trying to stay married, we'll run ads or anything like that, but we're not trying to be married to a specific brand. We're trying to share ideas and we're trying to
Right.
hopefully be coming in with a guest who is very knowledgeable on a subject that can provide the value, or if nothing else, just have a lot of fun having a good conversation at the fence post. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, exactly, exactly. No, that's a. I think the best part about social media is how much we can share good ideas, and it's just as easy to go down the negative road with social media if you're not careful. But I see social media as a plus in this industry and ag in general, if used correctly, like anything, like any piece of technology. So, and it's also fun. I would have never got to know if we were doing seed sales in the 1980s. I wouldn't know half the people I know today. You know, wouldn't know half the things I've learned today if it wasn't for social media. Very, very interesting the way it expedites our learning curve.
very true. And there was something, and I didn't really know what exactly you did at that time, but I think it seems like you had either, because I just saw this when I reached out to you again when I was launching the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw where like the first time we connected was like 4 or 5 years ago, and you had either responded to something of mine or I had asked you a question, and then
Yeah.
you responded, and it was talking about just trying to find it. I can't even specifically remember what seed I was looking for at that time, and it was almost funny because we kind of triangulated right back, going back to Josh over here at Southeast, and we are like, oh well, I already got that,
Right.
avenue, but
Right.
um, but it makes it a small world, but it's still such a when we're looking at it from the perspective of serving our customers and serving agriculture. I don't. That's a weird way to say that, isn't it?
I don't know. Yeah. I think serving is a good
Serving
way to put it.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to encourage a conservative, or not, again, a poor way of putting this. I should probably get this cut out. But a way to go back into, I don't want to use the word regenerative or whatever
Right.
buzzword, but a way that we are utilizing, and you said this earlier, but utilizing Mother Nature the way that that God structured all this.
Right.
And yes, we can improve our genetics. You work with some exciting stuff, and I'll get you wound up on that in a minute. But
Sure.
that side of the side of being able to grow a really good forage and put the beef on that cow or get the milk from that cow or grow the calf, whatever we're doing. But the more that we can do of that from forage and the less resources we have to do to work through it, I mean, that's where we all should be trying to go, in my opinion, because
Right.
we don't want to be just mining the earth just to add it back to a different part of it to grow. It's a whole thing, and I'll let you talk for a while because I sound scattered.
You know, there's so many facets to this business, and I was trying to. There is a potential political candidate in my office about a month ago trying to understand the different facets of the beef industry, and everybody's, he said, I feel like everybody's just fighting each other, between each facet. And I said, well, you are trying to, gain your largest profit share in each area, whether that be cow calf or seed stock or stalkers or feed yard or packers or what have you. And so I think there's so many facets. It's easy to get lost in all the mix. Like you're saying, you feel kind of scattered between stuff, and we cater to everybody obviously in our business besides the packer because they don't need any seed. But it's very interesting to see how everybody's on the same boat here in the last 5 years of trying to make, in the forage world, trying to make the most digestible fiber with the least amount of inputs as possible. And as fast as breeding is coming along, we've got some super interesting stuff in the research pipeline. And when you get into forages, there's really summer annual forages. There's only 4 or 5 of us in the industry that are left, unfortunately, and that is one of the bad things. I would say is competition is a good thing. And then when a forage breeding company gets bought out by an international company or by a national or a major seed company, and then they don't see the value or the margins in it like they see in corn and beans, a lot of times they can their forage program or severely cut it back or, do something like that. And I think that's an unfortunate spot in our industry is there's very few people in it, and I think in the future I can see 2 more that are just you just don't know, but some more that may not be here very long. And so, but other than that, there's so many cool things happening in the seed world. I know a lot of the growers don't get to see that, or dealers don't get to see that. One of these days, you need to come out here. I keep telling Craig, you got to get out here and come look at the nursery, right? Come pick out something you want for your area. It's like shopping at Walmart. There's hundreds of new millets to look at every year, and hundreds of new BMR millets to look at every year, and it takes a while to narrow it down. And there's hundreds of new sorghum sudans and lots of just interesting traits we can put into stuff, and we really have begun to rely on our customer network to tell us, what do you need, instead of just throwing the book at you and saying this is what we got. What do you need? And so that's been a really fun way to connect with people is seeing what people need. And we've diverged some products down a rabbit path in the breeding world I didn't know we'd go down, but um, just kind of interesting where stuff's headed in the last 4 or 5 years. Where do you see your seed dealership? Where do you see you going with summer annuals?
Summer annuals are a tough one for me. They go hot and cold. I've had years where I've sold a fair amount of millet, and what I've ran into the last few years, because we've had so much pressure from army worms, they seem to be more susceptible than a sorghum sudan, and I don't know why it is, but even sudan grass seems like they don't get as affected. And I don't know if I still have them or not. I hope so, because I've had them for about 4 or 5 years. Videos of army worms coming out of the center of a Prime 360 is the trade name I sell it under, but the Prime 360 millet. And I had sold this to a guy who had never planted it before in his life, old timer,
Yeah, yeah.
mid timer, something. But he had never planted it, and he calls me early in our relationship as a customer and whatnot. So it was a I don't want to say I sold him because I don't. I typically just talk to people, hey, this is how I think it best, this is what I would do in this situation, yada, yada, yada. And if they choose to move forward, I try to make sure I'm supporting them. So anyway, he wanted to he wanted me to come look at it. He's like, I don't know what's going on with this. We get down there, and I mean, he got cleaned out. It was like something from the Bible with the grasshoppers. He was gone in like a 2 to 3 day window. And he goes, well, I don't know. And I think this was early September. He goes, well, I don't know what to do. Will this come back? And I'm like, I don't know. I said, let's kill the armyworms, because it doesn't matter what you do. You've got to kill the armyworms or you're not planting anything or doing anything.
Right.
He calls me and I remember this one, but it was the 27th of September, and he called me and he wanted me to come down and look at it again. And I did. And this stuff was pushing knee high. I'm not very tall, Chris, but it was pushing knee high. And I was just blown away. And I was like, man, that's incredible. You're going to get a cutting off of this before we get a frost. You're going to get a really good cutting, that's going to put you right in line for this perennial grass. I tend to tell people to plant, like, they're okay to plant a little later where we are, because we stay dry later in the fall. Anyway, this poor bugger calls me like October 5th and goes, they got me again, and cleaned him out twice. So he got no millet, and I felt terrible. And this guy, it doesn't matter what he's doing, what he's working on. If I even throw the word out that starts with an M, he's done with the conversation.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, we'll dive off in that for a second. When you go to the nursery and you look at all the breeding lines of millets and sorghum sudans, and we'll get a flight of moths come through and lay armyworm eggs. I don't know what, and we've never looked into it, I don't know what that insect can tell. But when we go back and do our test, the most digestible lines always get the eggs laid on it. And so when you look at a lot of sorghum sudans that are less digestible than millets, they would prefer to go to the millet, right? Because it's a more digestible product, not only for a ruminant, but even for something like a armyworm. And the way that those millets are so leafy coming out of the dwarf, those armyworm eggs can get down in that whirl, like you're saying. So they're hiding way down in there. The only way to really knock them back and spray them if you didn't catch them early is you really need to do it kind of at dusk or first thing in the morning. Middle of the day spraying for army worms on millets, at least for us, has always been kind of so efficacy. And so when you look at Prime 360, you're looking at incredibly high protein. You're looking at least in the vegetative stage, in the FD30s and the 70s, high 60s, and the army worms make the most out of that. And if you were to plant like just a conventional sorghum sudan next to it, they physically cannot munch through all of that higher lignin content. And so I don't know what it is about the insect world, and I've never asked some of my entomologist buddies, but it's crazy how they can pick out. We may have thousands upon thousands of lines across many acres in a nursery, and they can find that one row that's more digestible than the other. To the row, I mean, you can pick out where they laid their eggs. So I don't know if they're able to sense plant sugars, or I really don't know, but it's really cool to note.
This week's episode of Around the Fencepost is brought to you by Wet Meadows Seed Sales. Wet Meadows is a second generation seed dealership that's an independent dealer for Southeast Agri-Seeds and Byron Seeds. We focus on our digestible energy line with a primary focus on our grasses for hay or for pastures. We also can help with your cover crop mix. We can help along the lines of any seed corn or even conventional soybeans if you wanted to go down that rabbit hole. We'd like to invite you to enjoy this episode of Around the Fencepost, and showing the next decade to see like a more widespread book of summer annuals that would have more tolerance for or hardiness against such a thing without giving up. You mentioned the conventional, but what about a BMR or something along those lines to keep that digestibility super high? Is there going to be some potential for more work there?
In terms of armyworm, trying to, get the armyworms away from, is what you're saying? possibly.
Well, I could be asking about a number of them, but
Yeah.
I'll say armyworm for where I live.
Sure, sure. And the whole, for the most of us, from us back east to you guys through the Midwest, armyworms are terrible. Currently, there's nothing native that we could breed into those products that are going to be incredibly effective. Basically, you just have to go to less digestible products, which you don't want that anyways. The other side of that is a place we're never going to take. At least at this time, we're never going to take GMOs and put it into sorghums and or millets. Because you can get away like Viptera traits from Syngenta that's going to be able to work against the armyworm, but I don't see anything like that happening in sorghum world in the near future. And I don't know if we want that. I mean, we keep our product lines clean, and we have a lot of organic dairies that they don't have to worry about any contamination in the traits like they do with planting organic corn. And so we fit a really good niche by being staying out of that market.
Yeah, and it's probably a good. I think there's a positive to, like, at a certain point, maybe we do have to draw that line. You mentioned a Syngenta piece on there. At a certain point,
Yeah.
maybe we need to draw that line. Like, crop failure is a thing, like counting everything as. And Josh and I had this conversation one time last year. You probably wouldn't remember it, but we had a conversation at one time last year, and it was like, where is it written that we're guaranteed any of it? Like, if we get a good crop, hey, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm thankful that it really worked, and I like this, and I want to try it again.
Yeah.
But where is it guaranteed that this is a sure thing that we have a positive one?
Right.
And yeah, he's correct. It's not. And when we sit here and we've kind of not helped a lot of things by solving for one or two.
Yeah. Yeah, this is before my time, but I guess in the 70s and 80s, they had bred in green bug resistance into grain sorghum. And apparently, after putting in on the green bug tolerance or resistance, as they called it, it really knocked back the yield. So, I mean, what do you really, you're going to have army worms. When you get them, they're bad, but you don't always have them. And there is a product out there that's OMRI rated. I cannot remember the company, but it's called Forage. I don't know if they've ever figured it all out, but they have one for headworms and earworms, and it's a native virus for the worm. And so you spray it across your field right when those eggs hatch. That egg is going to consume some of the tissue with the virus, the plant tissue, and that virus is going to replicate inside of that worm. And it basically just, I don't know how to say it. It just turns a worm into mush, basically. And it melts down on that plant where the next armyworm comes along and munches on that plant. Well, it's going to kill it. And so it's a self-replicating, safe, effective, OMRI labeled product. I don't know if they ever finished it, but it's from Australia originally. The company is, and I think they have a place in Texas where they breed that virus. And it kind of sounds scary. We're breeding virus, but really it's just for a nasty old little worm. So try not to get people too worked up about it. But yeah, it's also cheap. Or well, I hate we're using the word cheap, right? It's also cost effective, and it's there's no withdrawal dates for grazing. It's just a really great product on the halogen side, which is the headworm side. So if they ever get the phologen thing figured out and you get it applied correctly at the right time, the right rate, it's pretty fantastic. Something to look at for you.
Yeah, kind of. There could be enormous potential for that. Yeah, it really could be, and then it's a matter of how it gets sprayed and how that gets applied, and which again you just mentioned you have to wait to see what actually gets finished
Right.
with it.
Right.
I'm going to go back and finish answering you had asked about my 5 years of summer annuals, because it does, like I said, it kind of will trend. Right now, my hot product, the thing that I got just such good feedback from over the last couple of years was the it's now called Energy Pro 93 of Sudan grass. And that one has been really good up in the area and really growing well. 50, 60 units of nitrogen, hit it with 15 pounds of sulfur, and you've got a crop, and I mean a good one.
Yeah.
I had one customer last summer was sending me pictures, and he goes, "Great, do you need to buy hay?" And of course, Everett last year, it wasn't a whole lot of good hay. This was good hay. Wasn't a whole lot of good hay around, but a lot of people thought that they had hay.
Yeah.
Looking at what people are doing in the well, now it's starting to go the other way again because corn's getting high and everything else. So we're going to start seeing that back off. But I had a customer call me the other day and goes, "Hey, I picked up some row crop ground. I'm having to pay plenty for it, but I want to come in with a summer annual and put some calves on it and let them go." And
Yep.
he's sitting there talking, and I'm like, "Dude, your math is mathing really well. Like, we're going to put you out." We're gonna put you out a patch of, and I think he's wanting to go with a. We'll probably wind up with a mix with a sorghum sudan and some cowpeas or some forage soybeans, something along that line. He wants a mix, and that's what we'll probably go with. But it was, the fact that that was starting to become an option because these crop guys are saying, well, if it costs me money to farm them, if it costs me money to farm 1,000 acres, I'll need to rent 1,100.
Right, 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 right.
So that ground's starting to come available that where all these farmers and growers, producers, I guess is really the word I want to use because we want everybody to listen, but
Right.
the producers involved that have kind of gotten in my part of the world have gotten scrunched down to the bottom ground or whatever ground that you can't
Right.
run equipment on, it's a side hill, all those things. We are now changed to, do you want opportunity to come farm this? And meanwhile, the landowners coming out ahead. They got all the positives to having livestock back on their land, and they're putting these cattle farmers are putting more back in
Yeah.
than the other guys are when you compare to what their nutrient removal looks like when they're pulling that other crop. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for a big increase in sorghums. My dad had a really interesting take on it because again, he's somebody that'll challenge a lot of thought processes around the conventional way you might do things.
Yeah.
So when he's saying, "Hey, let me do an early short season corn and come in behind it with a sorghum stand," part of his mindset is, if I do a short season corn that I'm not worried about, possibly a male sterile even, which he hadn't made up his mind on, but he goes, if I do that, I don't have to fertilize it like I would if I was going for ears. If I was going for top quality silage corn and with top,
Yeah.
I've got a field that's had manure just pumped to it. Hey, let's go in here. We're good on P and K. We know that. So let's put down, half the N that you'd put on a corn crop
Yeah.
normally, and you have significantly cut down your cost with the price of fertilizer this year.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's getting a little out of hand. The more we tinker in the Middle East, the more my bills go up. We made a big change with my banker last week. I had a lot of corn down, and I called him. I said, I think I'm going to do a lot of sorghum silage and gray stuff, and basically cut my inputs in half. And man, that my wife keeps our books. She kind of knows her dad's books. And makes the cow thing look a lot better than the row crop thing out west. And I'm excited about that, though. I mean, you can only do so much when you've got high interest and high inputs. And like you said, farm it. If you farmed 1,000 acres and you're losing money on that, why farm 1,500 acres and lose 1,500 acres? So let's just expand and work with what God gave us out here, which is sunshine, wind, and a little rain every once in a while. So it's been pretty brown this week. I haven't been able to do much outside. This one of those few times I'm glad I don't have windows in my office. I was at the store yesterday, or at the bank yesterday, and the guy sat down next to me and he goes, "Hey, are you from here?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I just moved here 2 days ago. This is the ugliest place in the world I've ever been forced to move for work." And I was like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, nobody moves here for the scenery. People are nice. Mexican food's great, but the scenery's a little rough." As a kid, Dad, when we had a lot of water, there's a lot of vegetable production out here, and we had to go to DC for um, vegetable conferences and stuff. And so we drive around Virginia and other places while we're in DC. And I couldn't believe that people didn't plant their trees in rows. I was mind blown that there was real rocks in fields, because you have to buy a rock out here. You got to go to a landscaping store and buy rocks. And if you're going to plant trees, you're going to plant them in a row around your house, right? And then going to the East Coast as a 5-year-old, I was like, these people are so unorganized. There's rocks everywhere, and the trees aren't in rows. I said, I don't understand any of this. I don't like it. And they're just, this is just grass country, right? And so as a little bitty kid who had just started traveling around the country, it was different. I think for us in the future out here, as we, as you're talking about sorghum sudans and grazing instead of putting them in row crops, we're doing a lot of millet with sorghum sudan blends. Every once in a while, throwing in some legumes if I think we have some, irrigation or rain potential or something like that. Maybe some cowpeas on those days. But adding in the BMR millet, we're getting that protein. And then we're either, in the past, I was adding a dwarf sorghum sudan, right? A BMR. Both products being BMR. Sorry. We are operating right now in the plant. So make sure nobody's getting hurt. And we're seeing in the dead heat of summer, mid 90s. Of course, we're lower humidity than you guys, so the cows don't, they're not overheating as bad in our temps. We're still seeing 2 to 3 pound gains through the heat, where normally on a sorghum sudan out here in the past, you're looking at like 1.5 pounds, maybe 2, but now we're 2.5, maybe 3. Cool years, I haven't got any data from last year, but cool years like last summer with some rain, put up a lot of biomass, put up some fantastic feed, and probably hit 3 on a lot of places. And so we can do that by only spending $20, $30, $40 an acre in seed. Oh man, that's money in the bank. The bank's happy, your wife's happy, happy wife, happy life. So
Yeah,
that's where stuff's headed.
It's a lot to be said for it. And if you can graze, I don't know, you kind of mentioned that you were putting cows out, which I was gonna ask you that when you mentioned buying the chopper here a couple weeks ago, was how much of the feeding program that you have is on concrete and how much of it is grazing. So what does that look like for you? How many months, or what's the rotation kind of look like?
Yeah, so the goal is to have enough mama cows that will be using up, behind seed fields, putting mama cows in there in October and keeping them through February. So we will have 5 months of grazing crop refuse and stuff like that. Then we'll go into summer grazing, and out here generally I'm not putting mama cows on heavy BMR. Normally it's going to be a nicer conventional sorghum sudan. Some of these really nice BMR products we've actually got cattle too fat on, right? Mama cows too fat, that's made calving season a little upsetting. So we have to be a little careful out here as how much weight we're putting on them. Then we're going to come in and put mama cows on grass, once our grass kind of greens up in the spring or summer. So we got multiple options in the summer. And let's say it's like 2011 and it only rains 2 inches. Well, we'll have enough silage put up. Now it's going to be higher quality silage. We can blend some straw with that, and then we can just dry lot those cows and not try to either, get out of the cows and sell them, or put them on pasture, and that's really going to hurt some of these short grasses. And so with the mama cow situation, incredible flexibility. Another reason for getting the chopper is, most of our country out here is row crop. So when we burn something up, or you have, a hail event or something where a row crop farmer wants to get out from it, we can just go in and chop those, put them up as a lower quality filler. Burned up corn, burned up sorghum. I've seen some guys put up sunflower silage in the Dakotas. There's a lot of sunflowers here. I've never done it. It's not high digestibility, fiber wise, but it's just something to to put up and keep the room full. Quite a few options that way. When it comes to the calves, goal is to buy 5 weights, and then we will be pre-contracted with a large corporate feed yard, and they'll take them at $8.50 off of us. And so, right there, we're going to put up. And we're going to put up a pile of that one product you were talking about, that photo period sensitive for the drought control and the tonnage, right? So, and then we're going to have the BMR that's in it. It's male sterile and it's aphid tolerant. About 4 years ago, we first launched those lines. We try them all out ourselves here before we really let them go far. And I thought I killed a patch of it. A friend of mine had it on a big pivot, had it half with cotton, half with that product. And by August, it was crispy and it was blue. And I thought, oh man, I don't know what we did, but he quit watering his cotton, put a little water onto the feed on that sorghum Sudan cross, and we caught a little rain August September. We ended up chopping 17 tons. He just finished feeding that pile a week ago, and the starting calves on it in that same weight range was fantastic. So we'll have a pile of that put up. Then we're going to put a pile up of BMR millet that we're going to chop twice. So our goal there is 18 to 20% protein, NDFD 30 of high 60s, low 70s. We're going to put it up right. We're going to, get the moisture. We're going to swath it, pick it back up, get that moisture content correct for the correct fermentation. And then we're also going to grow grain sorghum and crack that ourselves, or maybe a little corn this year. And so when my nutritionist, he's a beef nutritionist by trade, right? But when we're breeding stuff at coffee, a lot of our stuff goes into the dairy world. Guys really harp on forage quality, good fiber quality. Well, we decided to start using that in our beef rations, and it's dropped the cost of a calf ration 10, 15 plus cents per pound. And so right now, my homegrown ration is floating, according to his numbers, around 65 to 68 cents per pound. Does not include yardage costs that you got to figure in, such as equipment and employees and upkeep of a small feed yard. But it's the newer we're getting in these genetics, the more digestible they are, the less we're having to spend on outside feed, the better the economics work for you personally on your own operation. So it's in the last 7 years, we've gone from maybe NDFD 30s in the low 50s to high 50s on sorghum Sudans. Millets have just been cruising for a bruise, and really, the dairy guys have really caught on to that in a lot of areas, and can replace some alfalfa. Whereas we run out of water, you can put millet in instead of alfalfa. So lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the alfalfa is a great call out. And I'm not like we've done it here. Not a lot of people grow it right in our exact area, but we've done okay with it. But it's almost like this stuff is really a needy plant for as good as some of the competition has been.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I love alfalfa. I mean, if we had the water for it, I'd probably grow more of it. But there's just a little alfalfa left. 2011, like I keep saying, there was quite a bit of alfalfa around here before then. And after 11, I mean, people lost stands. You just couldn't keep up with it. It was 118 degrees for weeks on end, blowing wind. Alfalfa doesn't really like that unless you got plenty of water like Arizona. And but like you're saying, you look into these new annual genetics, forage genetics, you're getting that same kind of quality, same kind of protein levels, and you're not stuck with something for 7 years. You need to grow it. You need to grow 2 years of good feed and put it up, and go back to corn and beans or whatever have you. And so the flexibility is there with these new products that just it wasn't there 10 years ago, 5 years ago, really. And it's interesting how stuff is compounded the last few years in terms of nutrient density and digestibility.
Yeah, that's as a nutritionist or former nutritionist. You just mentioned where the NDF has improved from. 15 years ago, a lot of people were saying, well, it feeds better than it looks on paper. Nutritionists just don't know what to do with it. Have you heard this?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And part of that is, if you're a consultant, right, whether you're an agronomist or anything else, you have the CYA issue, right? You want to cover your butt, and it's really easy to build rations based on corn silage and alfalfa, especially in the Midwest. And as you get out to us, Western dairies and feed yards and stuff like that, nobody was really sure what to do with sorghum on a dairy, right? Well, we can feed it to dry cows. We can put it in a heifer ration, which a lot of guys still do. But once you got into this better stuff, nobody really believed us. And now, as the dairies in New Mexico have really started to run out of water in parts of New Mexico, which is only an hour from me, wow, let's try some of this in the parlor. And we tried a little, and components didn't get hurt. In fact, components go up in some respect, and there's a few dairies I have that are nearly 100% off of corn. Not to say they don't rail in corn grain and grind it, but they're not growing corn on their own operation with their water. Photo period sensitive sorghum sudans, or photo periods in anything of any general aspect of that, you get more tons of dry matter per acre inch of water applied, or if it falls from the sky. And so you get west of central Oklahoma, and that, if you just drew a line up north through the states, that is hypercritical. Right? So if you only got 10 inches of rain, you really need a photo period out there to capture all of that valuable dry matter you can make. That's where we see a lot of guys moving to, and I feel like I keep hitting the same thing over and over again in this conversation. But I will say this: I was never a nutritionist by trade. I worked in the feed industry, but per se, I mean, it's all kind of rolled in together there. I think that's why guys got scared. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who's an older nutritionist, and he grew up feeding sorghum Sudan on his dad's dairy, and it was terrible, and I just can't. Well, that was in the 60s and 70s, right? I mean, things have changed, and all of a sudden, he's like our biggest fan out here in the last couple of years, after putting up a few piles and feeding millet through the dairy or feeding millet through a calf yard or anything like that. He's like, oh my gosh, where has this been all my life, right? We're making life easy for him now.
Yeah, so something I was talking about with someone the other day is pushing that red easy button at the old Staples commercials.
Yeah.
And you do have, of course, the big proponents for them, Kilser, and I think John Winchell is a bit of a fan on it, and they bring a lot of excitement to it. And of course, we've been talking about Craig, but Ernest, man, he can get a room fired up to want to do this.
Ernest's one of my favorite people to have out to the nursery, because you can just show him a few of the new stuff, and he wants a truckload tomorrow. You're 4 generations out, and he's already just can't wait to plan it. It's always, I'm a little more mellow and then you get somebody in here like Ernest and Craig and anybody else like that, and we got to have it. It's fantastic. Create 2 generations a year in breeding. So right now we have a nursery growing in Puerto Rico, and we took everything from the nursery here. It's been thrashed by our crew. It's been sent down there to be planted. We'll breed here shortly, and we'll send it back and plant it around July 4th here to miss the hail. Breed here and just go back and forth. Our breeding nursery kind of got mucked up in some bad hail this year, and didn't get to do a lot of fun stuff like we normally do. But we are the largest forage breeding nursery this side of the world when it comes to sorghum Sudans, and especially on millets. I mean, that's kind of our forte right there. But we do some forage sorghums. We're changing over our females because we're trying to hit some out of the ballpark digestibility numbers that don't normally hit in forage sorghum. A lot of times you get in the western U.S. and feeding forage sorghum's kind of like feeding a bunch of post-toasties boxes. I mean, they feed like cardboard. There are some good BMR forage sorghums out there today, but hopefully the stuff coming can kind of put those to shame. And so I think where we're headed is, like you said, Kilser, high sugars with no grain and really large leaf component, standability component. And I think what a lot of people don't talk about either, and it really probably hadn't come across Kilsers or anybody east of the Mississippi's line, is higher sugars also lend themselves to really good drought and insect tolerance. And so if you think of like a sugar cube per se, and the way it can absorb water, osmotic pressure in a plant. And when you have high sugars in those sorghum plants, you're able to draw water up better from those roots. So if you take we did a study about 5 years ago on one of my dryland fields. We planted just a traditional forage sorghum. We planted a really high Brix, really high water soluble carb product, and then we also planted a photo period. So the traditional forage sorghum, which was not an old one, it's new. It just couldn't handle the drought. I mean, we didn't even chop that part of it. We take that higher sugar content product, does not even have aphid tolerance, and I had aphids. Aphids really didn't like it. Higher Brix is not good for sucking insects, and so they don't like that either. But it also, cruised through the hot weather like it wasn't a big deal. Never irrigated it. And then the photo period did fantastic, right? Just cruised through those hot days. No rain very often. This is going to sound terrible for guys, but for me, a really good dry land yields 7 wet tons. It's 65 or so. The traditional forage sorghum was only cutting 1 to 2 tons. And so, huge difference. We were making 7 to 8 tons on the rest of that field, whether it be the photo period or the high bricks product, right? And so I think there's some more things to be looked at in the high sugar world that Kilser's got everybody excited about, right? High sugars, after you let stuff sit there, don't let it make seed. There's still the argument out there that this whole new shearer processor, which they have a great processor they're working on, it's a little slower to chop with, to process the berries in a chopper, but normally those products aren't the best when it comes to fiber digestibility. They're not the best when it comes to sugar content and things of that nature. So it's kind of diverging right now. Like, do you want the starch? Do you want the higher forage quality? And right now, a lot of it, while grains are less expensive than they have been in the past, it's forage quality is what everybody's shooting for, and that's what we're breeding for. And the newest product, I hate to just drone on here, so stop me if you want to stop.
I'm getting a lot out of this. I do need to make sure I ask that question I'd sent in over about the customer one, but that's the only thing I want to make sure we touch before we get Go ahead.
Yeah, so the newest things in the nursery, we're looking at something that's incredibly high sugars, BMR 6, male sterile, aphid tolerant, single chop with regrowth. So what we've taken things out of every aspect of summer annual forages and just rolled them together. The hard thing is, every one of those traits is recessive, right? And so you start putting a lot of recessive traits together, and it's like creating aliens. You're gonna put a lot of things together, and you're gonna look at it in the nursery when you go plant it the next go around, and you're like, oh, well, that's okay. We're gonna trash half of this, right? But you're gonna pick out that one thing that kind of stands out and keep going down that pathway for a few generations. And I think what we've got to now is Rock River called me, the lady who's our Rock River rep. She's also works on our data, helps me compile that. She goes, I think you did something wrong. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? And she goes, it's one of your tests, for a certain set of sorghums is showing better than all of our corn tests. And I was like, I think you need to come to the nursery again and look. And so basically our water soluble carbs, without letting, the Kilser way is let's let the thing grow up and then just sit there, right? And we're going to accumulate more sugars after the plant's matured. What we're breeding with is we're going to have sugars from day one, right? And so we can accumulate more later, but our current sugars are in the high 20s. I dare to say some of them hit 50s. I think that's kind of a rarity and probably not where we're going to end up. But water soluble carb wise, we're double what a lot of it is. And then our NDFD 30 is still in the 60s. And our tonnage on a single cut, a relatively fast single cut, I don't know if we can hit 20 wet tons with incredibly high digestibility. And our milk per pound, or milk per ton is over 3,400, 3,600. And so I think we're on the cusp of something really interesting. I don't know where it's going to land. It's been a long time coming. But yeah, some really cool stuff that you can't find anywhere else unless you want to come out and look at it. And we really love having people out to look and give us their opinions and thoughts. And everybody farms in such different conditions in such different ways. It's nice to have a lot of folks to just bounce ideas off of.
About to call Ernest and tell him I'm hitching a ride on his next trip.
You should come have a plate of tacos with us, spend a day in the nursery. We are not a show nursery. We are a working nursery. We don't do a lot of pretty, you go to Rockville and look at their beautiful nursery with all these hand mowed walkways, and it looks like something out of a storybook. We are a true working nursery, and you're there with the people breeding at the same time. And so it's a little different look than what most people think. You got to kind of bounce through the nursery to find what you're looking for, but it's acres upon acres and acres of interesting new stuff that's really, we're pushing the envelope. I wouldn't say that 10 years, 8 years ago, but we really are pushing the envelope on forage breeding. and how much energy can we pull out of some sunshine and a little rain. Pretty proud to say I think we're at the forefront on some of these. And I mean, we are worldwide. People in a lot of drought prone countries use us. We ship overseas, start bagging for that around Thanksgiving and finish up around the 1st of March. And now we're focused on, US customers like yourself. And we start bagging from South Texas, South Florida, and we work our way north. So we'll be sending stuff to Canada here shortly. But I guess I should give a little spiel on coffee seed if you don't mind.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, yeah. So we're a family-owned company, one of the last few family-owned breeding companies. Been around since the 70s, 80s, and Carl Wardlow's the owner. He bought it in '95. He had started work out of Texas Tech. He's from here. The nursery's actually on his home farm, and you'll never hardly meet the guy. He doesn't have a social media presence. He just loves breeding, and he started working for Dr. Coffee. That's where the name came from. He was an old Texas A&M Aggie. That was when I was a kid in the '90s. I thought he was old. He was. He was born in the. I think he'd be 100 and something today, if I remember right. And he was one of the first guys that helped breed grain sorghum down into a shorter stature. That way you could cut it with a combine. So the guy was a sorghum genius. Sold a couple different seed companies, then started Coffee Forage Seed, but it also was a huge vegetable production thing. So if you're a fan of seedless watermelons, if you're a fan of cantaloupe, I mean, he was an epic cantaloupe breeder for a long time. And Carl spent the best part of his years right out of college on his hands and knees breeding cantaloupe at 6 in the morning before the bees got up. So Carl's got a lot of background in vegetable crops as well. We produced okra seed for a long time when I was a kid. My grandpa grew for Dr. Coffee. My dad and Carl are the same age, went to high school together. Feels like to be at Coffee feels like family because it's like being back, like it was when I was a kid again. It's nice to be here. But we transitioned in 1995 to be all, of course, I wasn't here then. I was in, whatever, second grade or something. But in '95, it transitioned all into forages, and the vegetables went with Dr. Coffee's daughter. And she's got a company in Poolville called Will Hot Seed. You can still order their vegetable seed online. Great people. The Coffees are just fantastic folks. But yeah, watermelon seed was a huge thing for us for a long time. But after '95, it's hyper focused on forages as we move forwards, and millets and sorghum sudans and forage sorghums have come a long ways since then. And everybody's like, I don't know why you can't do this or this with your sorghums. I'm like, you got to realize that we're in like the infancy stages where corn's been bred on for decades and decades and decades and decades, hundreds of years. We're just at the forefront of what we think we can do with sorghum. So we're not plateauing anytime soon. The sorghum industry is really, in my opinion, just starting to take off and see what we can do with genetics. And I think that's the most exciting part is coffee seed. It's been here for a good amount of time, strictly in the forage side. That's all we tinker with. I mean, we had some few food grade products, some lines, some specialty products we tinker with as well. But for the most part, that's all we focus on is digestible forages. A lot of the people in here in the plant have been here since I was a kid. There are, there's grandpas with their kids, and so it's very much generational from an employment aspect as well. Everyone says once you start working at Coffee, you never leave, which is a good sign, right? I mean, you want that.
That's a great sign for the culture.
It is. It's we're definitely a family here, and families can have lots of fun if put together correctly, and we do have a lot of fun at what we do. And the guy, it's interesting. The guy that's kind of in charge of the nursery, he learned it from his dad, and so his dad passed away a couple years ago from cancer. And he's taken over that role. Now he's training his son how to do the nursery, and so how to get it planted, how to move pollen, how to do all the little intricacies of keeping a breeding program going. And I think that's really cool that it just continually gets passed down. It's generational knowledge, and you can say that it is a science, but in my opinion, it's more of an art. And when you get into this is true old-fashioned breeding. We're taking things and just putting them together and see what we end up with. I think some people get a little overwhelmed by our nursery. They call our company the mad, Carl the mad scientist, with the amount of stuff that we're creating. But you don't know until you just start putting things together. You don't know what you're going to end up with, right? And so that's the best part about being here is we can stumble upon some really neat crosses and neat hybrids that fit really some niche areas in the forage. I couldn't be happier where I'm at. It's a great place.
That's incredible, and that says so much about them. And obviously, for anybody that's in the market, it helps a lot knowing that they're working with a good company. There's
Yeah.
a lot of angst towards people or towards the corporation type thing, which not that really matters. You're selling to companies from the size of Southeast Agri-Seeds all the way to cropland, so
Yeah.
it's quite an array. And I'm not picking on, again, I've mentioned that earlier, I don't want to pick on anybody, large or small, as
Yeah.
long as we have a heart in the right place towards helping agriculture and helping our producers become better at what they do. So I had a fun text a couple weeks ago. I've got a customer that's been with me for several years and super smart guy, and I started the podcast, and he had just said, I saw some stuff on social media. What are you working on? I just let him know, and he started listening. Guy's a super trooper. Listened to 3 episodes in one day when he first found it.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I know. And he he had asked me, he goes, and I already had you on the calendar, so I was like, oh, I'm sitting on this one. I'm gonna let Chris do it. So
Oh,
he was looking at Sudan grass, and he said that when he was researching, it wouldn't talk to him. He couldn't find a video talking about Sudan grass, but they wanted to go straight to sorghum Sudan. So he was asking for a proper explanation of the difference.
oh, that's a great question. So obviously, most of the stuff we breed here is a sorghum Sudan cross, and so what that is the male is going to be a Sudan, and that's going to carry a lot of the traits. Let's say, photo period or aphid tolerance or da 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 da, and then the female is going to be more of a sorghum looking plant. And that's the seed you're planting. It looks like sorghum seed, but the male was the Sudan grass, and that's where you're getting the sorghum Sudan cross. Now, straight Sudan grass is rarely grown or produced in our area because we're too windy. Sudan grass is another one of those African subcontinent of India type things that's moved over here. It's all produced in far southern California, far southern Yuma area of Arizona. Even when we are trying to produce our males here, when the male Sudan grass seed gets ready, just the lightest breeze and it falls out on the ground, right? But Yuma, far southern California, they don't have any summer breezes. Hence the reason I never went to work in southern Phoenix area. That was just too hot. They didn't have any, kind of summer weather like we have. And so you can go out there and harvest the Sudan grass. And I don't have much experience in straight Sudan grass per se. There was a big push for a while when nitrates were kind of an issue and people didn't understand them. There was a line of Sudan grass that came out that was lower in nitrates, and people started breeding with that, and that's kind of helped alleviate some stuff. And traditional Sudan grass could get really high nitrates. But that's all kind of moved out of the issues now as people understand how to manage nitrates a little better with summer annual forages. But yes, Sudan grass is its own thing, right? It's its own type of grass. You can cross Sudan grasses, and it's still just a straight Sudan grass. But we are sorghum Sudan, where the female is a sorghum, the male is a Sudan grass, and that's why you're kind of getting those chunkier looking plants than you would with just a straight Sudan. Is that an adequate enough explanation per se?
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that. So is the Sudan grass the male, that's where the nitrates come into sorghum sudan and cause a concern, or they be there regardless because of summer annual?
Regardless. Yeah, regardless. Summer annual grasses, especially when you're putting them onto row crop ground, can cause issues. And I think a lot of guys get concerned like, hey, these newer sorghums, I've got worse nitrates. Okay, did you ever measure your old sorghums, or are you just now figuring it out? But a lot of it is we're also shooting for drought tolerance and larger, deeper roots. And so when your roots are deeper and a larger fibrous content, you're reaching down into nitrogen reserves that your row crops never touched, your older hay crops never touched. And so now we're going deeper, we're extracting, we're mining out those nutrients that you spent a fortune on over decades on your ground, and we're pulling those back up. So, like you had mentioned earlier, putting out adequate sulfur helps with that, right? So, 5 to 1 is the ratio. If your soil is already balanced, 5 units of nitrogen, 1 unit of sulfur. That's kind of the magic number to help manage nitrates in millets, sudans, sorghum sudans, or forages.
So should we be pulling? I'm sorry, I know we're running a little over. Are
Yeah,
you okay?
I got all the time in the world, man.
So should we be pulling deeper soil samples prior to planting summer annual? So instead of going from the 4 to 6 inches, should we be pulling 9s, 12s?
I think the way to really find if you have deep pocket nitrogen is you're talking like having a service come out. I'm talking about pulling nitrogen from 3 foot to 8 foot up, depending on your soil content. Yeah, yeah. So your top few feet, it's any crop's going to touch that for the most part. But you get into these newer millets that are real drought hardy that can really go down and mine some stuff. You're talking about pulling up nitrogen from at least 4 foot down, and in areas where you have a sub layer of soil where that nitrogen is leaching down to and kind of stopping, that's where you run into an issue, especially in lower rainfall areas like us where you don't leach very well. It just doesn't move very fast. Of course, from a cover crop standpoint, get some of these male sterols out there and let them help you pull up those nutrients back to the top. That's the best part about these new ones is let's say you're not going to graze it and you are concerned about nitrates, get some of the newer ones that are deeper rooting, that have more of a webbed root, pull up that nitrogen and get it back up into that row crop area, so you're not having to purchase so much nitrogen while stuff is so expensive. So that's kind of my thought to guys is try to use them for what they're meant for.
Yeah, I like that. You mentioned all the work you guys have been doing with millet.
Hmm.
I wanted to bring this, and I'm trying to figure out how the best way to word it, but we're just going to run it. So Prime 360 has been the best thing in my book that I sell from Southeast and from Byron's for the
Hmm.
last, I don't know, 8, 10 years, right? A
Yep.
little while.
Yep.
You're talking about newer ones, whether they're hardier, which is one of my biggest issues with it. And typically, and I have that army worm story that I told earlier, and I enjoy that story. It's funny in hindsight. It wasn't funny then because I
Oh
had a new
yeah.
coach
Yeah.
that was not happy.
Yeah.
but in hindsight, like I can get a laugh. But if we had a hardier plant that would maybe, and you talked about the digestibility, how high that has gotten, and we talked about just being maybe a more tender or sweet plant. Those are obviously things I'm sure you guys are trying to solve for on that regular basis. But
Yeah.
is there another millet that you would put side by side with the 180 that you would say is possibly better in certain situations, or is there something that I should be recommending instead of?
No, either one of those, either 180 or 360, I mean, closely related. Either one of those are phenomenal products. I would say the next couple of years or next couple of breeding generations, expect to see some. And you can call Ernest today and ask him, hey, how did those? We sent Ernest some packages of millet this big, because we start with like one single head of seed, right? And they're phenomenal. I think maybe 30% more tonnage on some of them, whether they be conventional or BMR. There's new things coming out in both lines. Josh has that product called Leafy Tea,
Yes.
and if you let's say you compare it to just like golden German, Japanese, white, all those other single strain single strain millets. Sometimes we're 3x the tonnage, especially when you get into a big thing in millet is it's hard. if you look at where millet came from, sub-Saharan Africa, right below the Sahara, it's really low humidity, right? Right. And so you take them to the southeast or to where you're at, your high humidity, traditionally millets don't do well because they get various leaf diseases. And so when you look at Josh's leafy tea and you compare it to some of the older varieties, it's a lot less leaf disease. Therefore, you're capturing more sunshine, you're producing more biomass. And so sometimes we're looking at a third more tonnage with leafy tea versus other conventionals. Older conventionals. And if you come to our breeding program, you'll see that there are some faster ones coming. Now, mainly that's for, Byron's Northern Territory or Canada. What can we do with a minimum amount of days? And the guys have been asking for something that's an even faster millet. So we've had some stuff coming out that's, 10 days faster or 2 weeks faster. But the tonnage is better, the digestibility is there, the leaf disease pressure is there, the drought handling capabilities there. In our nursery, we're able to, the nice thing about living in an area where it doesn't rain much, we can kind of be God in the nursery and turn off some water as it goes through. As a pivot walks through the nursery, we have individual nozzles. We can turn them off on certain rows and then see what the drought stress does. And so some of these newer millets are handling the drought even better than millet handles drought, and that typically handles drought. So I'd say there's not one blanket answer for the new millets that are coming out. Some are more drought tolerant, some are possibly more digestible, some are faster. When you have 300 or 400 children a year to look at, each one of them's got, you've got kids. Each one of them has their strengths, and it's no different in the nursery, right? You look at some of them, and you're like, oh man, that would be awesome in the southeast, or this would be great in the Mediterranean area of North Africa or Italy or somewhere. And everybody needs something different. And I'm not going to say we cater to everybody, but we do have a massive lineup of products. There's just not a way for, you can't just get on our website and figure out what it is, because we don't have a website in this day and age, which is really funny. A lot of people are like, hey, we want to get on your website and look at some stuff. I'm like, well, good luck. You can't find us. We are very much on personal relationships, handshakes, and kind of old fashioned values, but with new and interesting products all the time.
And yeah, I was going to say, following just on that education thing, and hopefully the people you guys are working with are doing their part in educating. And
Right.
I've learned a ton today on this, and I'm excited because now I'm over here like, oh, I feel like I learned something.
Yeah.
Even though I felt like I had a decent handle on it, I definitely, I've learned. So I appreciate you dropping all this knowledge. Is the group of product selection you're currently working with, like, is it going to, you guys continue, or do you look at other things? So for example, I was just at the Tennessee Forage and Grassland Council, and they were talking about a plant that was Brazilian bred that's supposed to be super, it really handles heat and drought, and UT is apparently doing some work with this plant. So do you guys look at stuff like that, or not until it becomes a thing?
No, we have seed interests around the world, right? And so we look at a lot of really interesting things in the nursery that we may not breed with, because you'll take them here and let's just plant a couple rows up and see what it does. And if it looks terrible, then we just won't go down that road. But I think it's interesting with universities. There's always somebody from overseas bringing things in to look at, and that is part of the, I'm not going to say it's competition, but it's interesting to look at what other people are doing worldwide, right? And so one man's drought is not another man's drought, depending on where you're at. A drought for you is probably not a drought for me, or vice versa. There's a lot of things in forage world that have come out of interesting, strange things that have happened at universities, like A&M. University of Georgia has a lot of old things they worked with. As long as we can continue to access some of that. I had someone approach me from a Midwestern university a couple weeks ago, want to send me some stuff to look at, breed with, I don't know. They just want to see it in somebody's breeding program and see what it does. So as long as we can continue to share on a public university level, that's pretty cool. But yes, we have, besides just what you guys see, there is so much more out there. And some of it makes commercial sense, and some of it is pie in the sky, right? When I was in school for a while in Kansas, a guy down the hall from me had one of his projects was like working on flour that could be used on the trip to Mars with NASA. I mean, some of it's so far out there in university world that I can't make it make sense to a cow guy down the road tomorrow. But it's great to see the kind of research that's always happening in universities. And that's encompassing universities worldwide, right? It's interesting. There's a lot of African universities still working on millets, obviously, and different sorghums, because that is a hot, dry part of the world in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're depending it on a human food use reason. Millet porridges are really popular in certain areas over there as a main carbohydrate staple. We look at some food grade millets for that reason, and so the world, besides this one conversation on just forages, the millet and sorghum world is actually incredibly large and incredibly diverse. Most people don't get to see that.
So I had an Uber driver in Dallas one time that told me for an entire 20-minute ride that I needed to. I haven't had good bread until I had like sorghum bread or something, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah, actually, the waffles we make, waffles and pancakes at our house are sorghum and millet flour. Not just because of what I do for a living, but man, it's probably the best pancakes and waffles I've ever had in my life. So there's a
Good.
lot of, you can go to the store nowadays and buy a lot of different flours, and we use a Bob's Red Mill pre-mixed sorghum millet type flour. I don't know. I'd have to ask my wife what it is, but it's phenomenal. It really is. And we grow
That
wheat on our farm, and I'm not putting down wheat flour by any means, but just has a different taste to it, a little nuttier taste to it. Um, Makes a crispier waffle. So, every grain has a very different flavor, has a different way to bake and cook with it. Yeah, there's some really great products out there nowadays.
that one might have been for you. So, is there a way that people should be trying to keep up a little bit? I know you post a ton of good stuff on your, well, it's entertaining at least, but
Yeah.
stuff you put on your Facebook. Is there some is there something we should tell people to keep up with you a little bit?
Just join me on Facebook. I only have one Facebook. It's just my personal one. We've thought about starting one just for seed, but really seed is our life, and we're wrapped up into it as a family. And so I just decided, just keep it as my personal page. Please reach out with questions. I don't get on Facebook Messenger much, but you're more than welcome to reach out with questions. I love chatting with people on the phone about their problems. I can generally get through most of the summer annual problems without having to call somebody. But chemistry problems, herbicide issues, things like that for summer annuals, please call. I really like keeping people out of the ditches on their first couple times using, sorghums and millets. And there's some definitely do's and don'ts. And we get I had a phone call from France the other day, a completely different time zone. I was barely awake and he was nearly asleep, but it's good to chat around the world with these things.
That's incredible and completely agree. And it's so cool to see like the differences compared
Yeah.
and then the similarities as well. Like, hey, these are the goals we're trying to achieve with this crop, and this works well in our area because X, and this works well in your area because Y. So
Right.
some really good stuff today, Chris. We might have to do this one again. This has been a lot of good information. I will let you get back to work. Thank you for joining me here on Around the Fence Post. Good to
Yes,
meet you,
sir.
sir.
Thanks.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope something we shared helped you, challenged you, or gave you a new perspective. If even one moment stood out, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. That's how this community grows, one conversation at a time. You can find us as Around the Fence Post on Facebook and Wet Meadows Seed on Facebook and Instagram. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time, Around the Fence Post.